Well, the news just coming in. Anand Mahindra has taken to Twitter to announce, and this I'm going to read out his tweet. Chess originated in India as Chaturanga around 700 CE, so it makes sense for India to help catalyze a quantum leap in the game's global viewership and popularity. We're pleased to take a shot at being that catalyst with Vishwanathan Anand as co-conspirator. That's right, the Mahindra Group getting ready for a global chess league, and it's going to be done under the aegis of Tekken. Well, let's move on now. We've seen down under in Australia massive controversies around the big tech and news organizations. The Australian government has mandated that big tech better pay royalty or share money when they use news of publishers, media houses, all of that. Google has quietly toed the line, but Facebook has walked the talk. It's not interested and has started blocking. Here's the conversation my colleague Alex Matthew had with Ray Wong of Constellation Research all the way from Silicon Valley.
What's the mood out there in Silicon Valley? I know that a few people are already calling what the Australian government has done a shakedown. But what's being made of Google's decision to do what I think a lot of other people had said was the unthinkable, to bite the bullet and say we are going to sign a deal?
You know, Alex, I think we have to look at each one of the digital giants differently. They have different business models. In Facebook's case, right, the news shows up because Facebook has a news organization that decides to post their news, and that news then gets shared across different organizations. Google does it through search, and that search advertising, and that search link then has ways to compensate back to the news players if need be. But what is going on at the larger conversation is really the sanctity of journalism and the journalism business model versus a big tech shakedown. Both things are true. And that's really what's going on. Governments around the world are trying to figure out how do we take these disproportionate profits, as they call it, for business models that have been extremely successful and bring them back. And of course, companies that have been in the journalism business are saying our business model has been decimated because all the users are in these social networks. For example, in Australia, almost 70 to 80% of Australians get their news from social media channels. And so this is a big debate, but the consequences of Google making a decision saying yes to the advertisers, not the advertisers, but to the journalists and journalism companies in terms of being able to pay them for news is going to create a snowball effect on Facebook. And Facebook all across the board, because of the ad-supported model they're in, really has a tough choice in terms of figuring out, do they pay? And if they do pay, then every country is going to snowball in to say, you have to pay for news, and that's the fair thing, and every country is going to be rushing to get that legislation in play. So both things are true.
I think a lot has been said about, I think to a certain extent, the company's heavy-handed response to what is happening in Australia. And I think there's a lot of pressure building there, because I think a lot of governments, a lot of people want to bring down these tech companies by a few rungs. And to that extent, there is pressure building. But would Facebook be willing to return to the table, considering that they have very clearly stated that they give publishers a lot more than they get in the news space, that it doesn't contribute very much more than a small sliver of their business?
It's the fact that the audiences were in social media. But if we went back and looked at it 20 years ago or 10 years ago, the audience were not in social media, and publishers didn't make the effort to take the time to actually build those audiences. So that's really what created this scenario. Now, Facebook, on the other hand, has a perception problem all across the board. It's coming at it with the war against Apple. It's coming at it with the war against Australia and in different places. All around the world, people are looking at taking down big tech and the evil social media companies in that kind of way. I say that facetiously, but the point being is they are looking at ways to monetize or take some of those profits from these large companies. And there's some beliefs in, you know, some governments and some political parties that they need their fair share. But the challenge really is the business model within Facebook. It's really the members. The members provide their information, their data, their likes, their preferences, and that's what's being used to surface up to advertisers. Facebook, on the other hand, is saying, like, look, only 3% of the items that people share within us is news. That's not even a fair kind of an approach to this problem. They have put in a news section at Facebook which they have paid certain set of advertisers. And I think they never got to that discussion in Australia as both sides decided to escalate in terms of their conversations, and Google decided to force someone's hand by actually accepting an offer. I also agree with Nikhil. Only large publishers will get to play in this kind of situation, especially with these types of contracts that are in place. The smaller publishers will have a tougher time because they'll have to pay more, or actually have to pay in order to get to play in this order and play in this kind of content game. And that payment is really what's at the challenge. Is how do we make sure that there's lots of voices in journalism to make sure that we have that free and fair press?
Ray, I want to get your view on this as well, right? We've spoken about what has happened. We've spoken about Google doing the unthinkable, but having done the unthinkable, I think a lot of other countries, a lot of other governments will start moving very quickly here. So could we potentially say in the very near future, you could have, for example, countries in the European Union pressuring these big tech companies to cut similar deals?
Oh, this will definitely happen. People are looking at this as a worldwide precedent as to how to deal with big tech companies. You're going to see it in multiple ways, just in the way that the auto industry was decimated through all different forces. From we're going to have to unionize workers, we're going to have to tax you for, getting to, certain types of transactions in commerce. Like all these forces to get into the profit base, they're starting to build. And that's what the big tech companies have to worry about.